Okay, thank you very much, Anastasia, and thank you everyone for participating in this discussion. I would like to begin by noting that it's a distinct possibility that at the time of the next 69th meeting of the International Peace Coalition, a week from today, it's indeed possible that long-range precision-guided missiles could already be flying from Ukrainian territory, NATO missiles from Ukrainian territory in the direction of Russia. This is a very distinct possibility. There was a meeting last week at the White House between the British Prime Minister Starmer and President Joe Biden, sometimes known as Collective Biden, in which this topic was discussed, where the agreement beforehand between the United States and the UK was that they did want to move in the direction of using those NATO missiles, but that it had to be further organized, pushed internationally, and that they expected to have some announcements in the course of the upcoming UNGA, United Nations General Assembly meeting next week. In particular, there is scheduled to be a meeting on Thursday, September 26th, between President Biden and Zelensky of Ukraine, where Zelensky is scheduled to present his victory plan, quote unquote, which includes emphatically the use of long-range precision-guided missiles shot from Ukrainian territory deep into Russian territory. And I want to emphasize, just for starters, and this really is one of four major points that I want to address in my brief opening remarks, that what we are talking about here in terms of the danger of war, the aspect of the long range of the missiles has, which is important, has often been emphasized while not taking account of the fact that the precision guidance is perhaps the most significant feature. That is to say, these things cannot fly past, through, around, under, and over Russian air defense systems without real-time, highly sophisticated guidance available only through United States and other NATO assets, in particular American satellites. And therefore, when you're talking about, quote unquote, permitting the Ukrainians to shoot these things off, you're talking about this being the decisions being made on the guidance and on the missions themselves, not in Ukraine, but in London and Washington. The Russians are very well aware of this. They have said this repeatedly. President Putin has said it over the course of this week. There have been repeated statements to that effect coming from, among others, the head of the Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin, making it quite clear that if this happens, we are talking about entering the domain of nuclear warfare. Now, over the course of the last few days, as the drums have begun to roll and move in the direction of this kind of a process, you can see the preparations in various ways for this. Number one, the attack on the Toropets depot in Russia. Whatever the actual military significance of this, and I know there are a lot of different versions of this floating around, and we don't know the military facts, but the actual intent was to create the kind of incident which could be used to build up the idea that this is going to have to keep going on and go on far more seriously, deeper into territory and so on. Also, the aspect of checking out what the Russian air defense system is, profiling that and preparing for what comes. That's one very important development. A second very important development is the rapid escalation of the war on the Lebanon front, Israel's attack on Lebanon. It's part of the same global battle. We can get into this further in the rest of the discussion, but the same people behind those who are trying to provoke Russia or provoke a war between NATO and Russia using Ukraine are the same people who are using Israel to try to expand the war there and to get Iran involved in others, and then from that standpoint, Russia as well. This act of blatant terrorism, which occurred with the pagers and handheld radios and so on, is simply an opening salvo of that escalation against Hezbollah and into Lebanon. A third point on this, which I'd like to mention, is a statement issued by the Euro Parliament on, I believe it was yesterday, in which they called for all member states to lift all limitations on the weapons which Ukraine is allowed to use. It's a very strong statement. It is explicit in saying as well that Germany must allow the Taurus missiles to be used, which is something that Chancellor Scholz has said repeatedly, which is quite amazing for someone who has as little demonstrated courage as he. No, 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 we don't want to use the Taurus missiles. The Europarliament called for that. It may well be the case that the Europarliament does not have decision-making power. However, the Russians know exactly what this means and have responded to this. Volodin, again, who is the head of the Duma, personally very close to Putin, and furthermore is on the National Security Council of Russia, responded to the Europarliament vote by saying that what they are doing opens the way to a nuclear world war. Moscow has more powerful weapons. No one should have any illusions about this. The State Duma insists on this. Now, the timing around this and the insistence in the direction has everything to do with two related developments. One is what's going on around the United States elections, and the second is what's happening in the global majority, in particular, the build up to the BRICS. As for the election side of this, let me just quote what Jake Sullivan had to say earlier this week. This was in a message that he delivered by video link to a conference in Kiev, the Yalta European Strategy Conference. And the discussion was how much help